The Guardian is reporting that clearing Gaza of almost 40 million tons of rubble will take roughly 15 years. And that's if the bombing stopped today. If Israel stopped the bombing this minute, 15 years. That's also if they were allowed the ability to clean up the rubble. If they were given the machinery to clean up the rubble, because everything in Gaza has to be allowed in by Israel. They are in a prison, right? And that's the difference. When people go, they're not in a prison. Look, there's a cafe. Look, there's a bakery. It's not a prison. Well, if you can't leave and you can't really govern yourself because you're being bombed all the time and your access to resources like building materials, food, medicine, etc., is all carefully monitored and limited by Israel, then you're in a form of prison. And so if Israel doesn't allow them the machinery or the ability to clean up this rubble, of course, it won't get cleaned up at all. Even if they did, even if they said, here's the machinery, here's the ability, here's the money you might need, etc. Even if they did all that, it would take 15 years. And the assessment is it would cost $500 to $600 million. And that's not to rebuild. That's to clean out the rubble. I've never lived amongst a lot of rubble, but from what I know, a society has a lot of trouble of existing when the buildings are all collapsed. And I mean, even if you're just walking past the rubble, it creates things like disease and injury and harm and the inability to get commerce to go through, for vehicles to get through, for food and medicine. All of that stuff can't function when there's rubble everywhere. Yeah, of course, they're estimating 10,000 are dead under the rubble right now. So really, we're at 50,000 murdered by Israel, not counting disease and famine. The Lancet Medical Journal has said it's 186,000 if you count famine and disease, etc., and wounded who ultimately died. So 186,000 as opposed to the whatever 38,000 we're told. 70% of those are women and children. And anyway, this is this new analysis by the Guardian, by the UN. I have gone after DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, before, endorsing AOC and others, despite the fact that AOC has proven that she'll vote for our trillion-dollar military. Sometimes she'll vote against sending more weapons to Israel, but most of the time she's voting in favor of these garbage, with some very small examples. I don't think she's different than your average Democrat, at least not now. I had, when the DSA was continuing to tout her, I was like, for what? What has she achieved? And when she votes for this U.S. empire destruction of the world, what are we supposed to go, hey, yay? I am not that celebratory of that. Anyway, it seems DSA has finally had enough. Now, I'm still suspicious that DSA often just funnels people into voting for Democrats, but, that's an argument for another time. But the DSA has put out this national endorsement of Ocasio-Cortez, except that if you look at what it requires for them to endorse her, there's about zero chance that it's going to happen. Last month, they voted to endorse Representative Ocasio-Cortez as long as she fulfills the following conditions: publicly opposes all funding to Israel, including the Iron Dome, which she voted to fund the Iron Dome, to continue the Iron Dome. So she hasn't done that. Participates regularly in DSA Federal Socialist in Office Committee. Publicly opposes all criminalization of anti-Zionism, which she did a long interview recently and had on a guest. She was the one that created the interview for someone else and basically promoted this idea that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And she gave a big platform for it, as if anti-Zionism, as if critiquing Israel's anti-Semitism is absolute, disgusting dumpster fire propaganda. She's not going to do this one either, opposing all criminalization of anti-Zionism, such as bills advancing the IHRA definition, which conflates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, and then finally publicly supports BDS to end Israeli settler colonialism. She is not going to do any of those, probably, but at least three of them she's absolutely not going to do. So I guess this is DSA saying they'll endorse her, but if she does things she'll never do. So I guess this means they are not endorsing her because she's definitely not doing at least three of those things ever, because she still has her eyes on the presidency, I believe. But anyway, good to see that the DSA has finally seen the light a little bit. Good to see they're finally like, oh, oh, turns out she's, basically supporting this genocide. Good to see they're starting to notice that. It only took them a few years, but it's good. It's good to grow up sometimes after a little while.